Hello and welcome to a new tier list Tuesday. Today we're going to take a look at the Open Master League and we're going to rank 50 Pokemon for the Open Master League. I basically went for the top 50 on PvPoke again, but I excluded Shadows, and afterwards I just looked for some Pokemon that have at least a little bit of potential that I can rank here, because after around like 40 picks or something, there was not a lot that really had some play there. So today we're going to have some interesting Pokemon in here as well, but we're going to start right into it. First Pokemon going to be here Gyarados, a Pokemon that is not legendary and actually fairly decent. This Pokemon is able to break basically the Hoenn legendary trio, as you're going to have Dragon Breath, Crunch, as well as like Awkward Tail. You're going to be able to destroy Groudon as well as Kyogre. Otherwise, a little bit struggling against Fairy type Pokemon. Fairly decent, B tier, very solid. Next Pokemon, I would actually put him around the same tier. A Pokemon that is really underrated as well in PvPoke is Snorlax. Maybe a little bit less good as the Gyarados for the Open Master League. This is not for like the Master League Premier Cup. For the Open Master League here, but very cool Pokemon to counter Ghost types, very strong there as well. Next one going to be the Zapdos. I didn't even know it was in the top 50. I have never seen this Pokemon. I would put it into D tier. I don't think it's going to be good, but yeah, I don't know why it's even there, but it definitely does exist. First Pokemon for the S tier is going to be the Dragonite. This is actually something that's very cheap to build and so on, like very decent to get as well. Very strong Pokemon. It does basically a similar job compared to the Gyarados here. While it doesn't really break as much the Rayquaza anymore since Breaking Swipe got introduced, it definitely is still very strong against a lot of Pokemon. And with the coverage of Superpower, it's a very good pick for this current meta. Something that a little bit fell off recently was the Mewtwo. I wouldn't put it S tier anymore. Honestly, this Pokemon is still very strong, don't get me wrong, but I don't really put it into the S tier. A tier is still very decent Pokemon to use, definitely very cool Pokemon to have, but it's not as strong as it was in former days. It's still a very solid Pokemon, but not that good anymore. Next Pokemon, going to be Tyranitar. Actually something that I want to build like crazy. Like you can use a Shadow variant, you can use either Smackdown or Bite, but both variants are going to be very interesting for the current meta. A lot of flying types are around, and for this reason this Pokemon has a lot of potential and is actually fairly decently bulky as well, and with Brutal Swing got even a little bit of a buff. So it's definitely an interesting Pokemon to take a look at, as I can move on to the next Pokemon. This is going to be a Lugia, straight S tier. Honestly, most likely my favorite Pokemon to use in this meta, just because it's such a solid save swap. Having access to Aeroblast is just making this Pokemon so much better. The counterpart to it, Ho-Oh, is very decent, but definitely not an S tier anymore, or currently at least. There are a lot of Pokemon that are fairly okay against it. It's still a very solid Pokemon. I would actually put actually Mewtwo is a little bit better, still a little bit more easier to play than Ho-Oh. You don't see it that often anymore. There was like a phase where Ho-Oh was everywhere, but it kind of went down, so definitely still solid. Like the next pick, it's not as solid, to be fair. I would have to put it into C tier. I think it's too bad for the B tier. The Swampert here. Swampert is not as good anymore. Back in the day, it actually still had some play. It still has some play, I think, in the Premier Cup, but in the Open meta, it does not really have that much play, sadly, so it's definitely not as decent. Something that I would put into A tier as well is going to be the Metagross. Very decent as a counter for like all the Dragon-type Pokemon as well as the Fairy-type Pokemon, so that's definitely a solid pick for that one. Very cool Pokemon to have. Definitely a cool Pokemon here. Next one, going to be the Latios. Actually, also a very nice Pokemon. It's just there are so many good Dragon-type Pokemon that I would put into C tier. It's more usable than Swampert for sure. I played myself, very decent because you have Dragon Claw as well as Luster Purge, which is a very strong moveset. But just like there are better typings for it. For example, like Dialga is just a better Dragon typing with Dragon Breath as well. But moving on now into another A tier. Actually, I don't know. I actually would put into A tier. It's a little bit of a lower A tier Pokemon is Kyogre. Very cool. It has like Waterfall. I hope Waterfall gets buffed, because I feel like Waterfall is just kind of holding it back a little bit. Doesn't really have the best coverage. Doesn't really get to the moves that fast. So it's a little bit awkward with this Pokemon, but still is solid against a lot of Steel type Pokemon. It's just having great stats. And of course, Surf Plus, the Origin Pulse is very decent. S tier for sure has to be the Groudon. It's summer here. I would put it in between the Dragonite and the Lugia. S tier Groudon, very strong Pokemon. Just presses Blade plus Mudshot is just so overpowered. Plus you have a bait with Fire Punch. Very strong. Definitely S tier there as well. Same goes for Rayquaza now, especially with a new move update as well. Rayquaza, one of my favorite Pokemon to use. Just Breaking Swipe is the best charge move in the game. It is just the case in my opinion. It just debuffs, has a lot of damage output. It's just so strong that it makes it just a little bit better than Dragonite as well. For sure S tier after the recent buffs there. Next Pokemon, going to be, in my opinion, another C tier pick. I actually don't like this Pokemon that much. It's definitely a little bit of a higher one. You could also put it into B tier. The Garchomp here, it's just like, I don't know, like, you have like Dragon Breath or whatever against you all the time, which is not nice. You have so many fairy types around, you have so many flying types around. It just does not really work that well for me, at least right now. So maybe I should try it out again, but it feels like it's not as good of a Pokemon. Something that's a little bit better, and definitely I would put maybe into A tier, but I would say I would put it into the upper B tier, as the Togekiss, the community, they moved in real meta for it, but the meta currently shifts towards a lot of Pokemon where Togekiss is good against. For example, the Groudon, for example, the Dragonite, for example, the Rayquaza, or even the Lugia. All of those Pokemon don't really want to face those fairy type Pokemon, so it's definitely a solid pick to go for. So, very strong pick there. The next Pokemon is also a very cool one. I would not put it into A tier. It is a very cool anti-meta breaker. I would put it even higher B tier, which is going to be Mamoswine. You could even argue putting it into the A tier for sure. It's definitely A tier or like S tier for like the Premier Cup, but for the open meta, it's a very cool Pokemon to use. Definitely a very solid pick. I like using it a lot, but it's a little bit squishy. Like the stats kind of hold it back, but it has a very nice moveset, especially with high horsepower. Very cool Pokemon. Clear S tier still. Well, Dialga is only ranked 25 on PvPog. This Pokemon deserves a way higher rating here as well. Somewhere around, actually I would put it even above Lugia. This Pokemon is still just top tier because of the typing. It doesn't even need really the charge moves or whatever, just the typing itself makes it so bulky, makes it so strong. Very cool pick. And the counterpart, sadly, kinda is lacking a little bit in terms of the damage output that it can do. The typing is not ideal. I would put it somewhere also into the B tier with a Palkia. It's not really the best Pokemon to use, sadly, but still strong. Also B tier, it's going to be Heatran. I actually used it today and went like on a 7-game win streak in general. Super positive with this Pokemon. Very great to use right now. I actually would put it into lower A tier just because it's a good like anti-meta Pokemon right now as well. I just tried it out all the time I tried it out. It's a very nice underrated Pokemon. People just sleep on this Pokemon. It's of course not S tier for sure. It's a little bit too slow for it. It needs a little better fast move for it. But like this Pokemon is just very good in the current meta. There are a lot of Pokemon like Lugia or whatever that you can really destroy with this thing, which is really nice to see. So very cool Pokemon. Something that does looks different on PvPoke at least. The Giratina Altered is actually ranked 3 on PvPoke, so I'm not gonna put it onto S tier, even though it definitely deserves somewhere around the spot. I just don't have the experience for it. I never really see this Pokemon, so it's difficult for me to rank it. I definitely want to build it eventually, but it's definitely something like an A tier there. Well, thanks for the news update there, computer. But yeah, we're going to have here now the A tier of Giratina. But the other Giratina, though, is definitely an S tier right now. Got a huge upgrade recently. Not with the moves, but with the Pokemon that you face. Because this Pokemon is actually able to beat most of the Fairy-type Pokemon right now. And it's just neutral against so many Pokemon. Shadow Clover plus Shadow Ball is just so nice. I see it all the time. It's a very cool pick. It's like low S tier, but both of them are very, very strong. Especially Giratina Altered as well, I think kind of slept on just because everybody uses Origin, because also for raids and stuff like this, so that's kind of bad. Next to Pokemon, while I went positive with this, I cannot put it above D tier right now. Darkrai, very squishy, just needs a signature charge move / fast move with like the Dark Void or whatever. It just needs some kind of buff. You need kind of better fast move for it. Snarl just doesn't really do it. Sludge Bomb is not really great for it. Focus Blast, you would have Yveltal for it, which is just better. So like it's not really the greatest Pokemon to have. Something that's definitely A tier though is going to be Excadrill here. I would put it a little bit lower actually than the Metagross. Somewhere here is kind of fair. Very good anti-meta Pokemon as a no legendary thing. That is, it's just a typing plus charging for the Drill Run is really nice. Being able to beat a lot of the Dragon type Pokemon, hardest counter for Dialga. Very good counter against like all the Lugias as well. Very cool Pokemon to use. Wouldn't put it as tier. It's a little bit squishy. Even like Rayquaza can deal with it, which is kind of wild in like 2-shield scenario because the damage just of Dragon Tail and Breaking Swipe add up while you can debuff the opponent the entire time, so it's not as great. But very cool pick still. As you can move on to the next one, it's definitely lower than the other, like, it was most likely somewhere here around, like, the Latios / the Garchomp here with the Haxorus. Having Breaking Swipe is really nice. The stats are just really holding this one back. It's just very, very squishy, very, very frail. Just gets farmed down way too easy, so wouldn't really put it that much higher than this. Very cool Pokemon though still, but, like, it's not as great as in, for example, the Premier Cup. In Premier Cup, this Pokemon is amazing, but here it's not as great anymore. Sadly, a D tier. While it is cool to counter Giratina Origin with this Pokemon, the Hydreigon is just not really hitting it. I'm just gonna put it into like higher D tier. It's definitely still usable. I just have some fun sometimes with this Pokemon, but it's not that great. And we can now move on to the next one as well, which is going to be another D tier Pokemon, which I even put lower. I mean, I actually got killed by one before, which is kind of funny. The Virizion actually has some potential eventually. But, like, you can counter, for example, Dialga with this. You can do some damage against Groudon, which is nice. So you have, like, kind of a core breaker for this Pokemon. I actually would put it into the C tier. I battled against it before. It's a very bulky Pokemon, surprisingly. So, like, you can definitely use it, but it's of course, a little bit more of a stretch there. Next Pokemon, going to be sadly a B tier pick in my opinion. Reshiram has some play. It is great with the stats it has. I think it's the same stats as like Dialga. Has a great moveset. Just the typing is not as ideal as other typings in the game right now. And like the partner in crime there, the Zekrom, is going to be the A tier Pokemon for sure. Somewhere around here as well. Like around the whole, they're very good pairing anyway, Ho and the Zekrom. But Zekrom just has a little bit of better coverage with the electric typing, being able to hit something like a Togekiss, for example. It's a little bit better than the fire typing at the current time, in my opinion. So let's take a look at the next one. We're going to have Landorus. Landorus is actually close to like, actually I would put it to S tier, like low S tier for sure, but this thing is like so spammy right now. I see it way more often than, for example, even a Mewtwo, and it's always tricky to deal with this Pokemon because Superpower Stone Edge have great coverage in the current meta. It has like basically the same attack stat as Mewtwo, so it is a very decent Pokemon to pick. I face it all the time. I always hate facing against it, so very cool Pokemon here. Yes, we have the other Landorus, which I actually kind of want to build as well here. This Pokemon has great move coverage as well, has a little bit of worse stats than the other counterpart, so you don't really see it too often, but it actually has like Rock Slide, which is kind of nice. So I would actually put it also somewhere around in the A tier, maybe just directly below it. Very cool pick as well though, definitely works out fairly well. The next Pokemon, I just don't really have the experience for it. Like, I don't really like it too much, to be fair, for like the typing it has. It's a very bulky Pokemon, but Meloetta, only for me, deserves really the B ranking here. Most likely a little bit better than the other Dragon, but it is not that great to, like, it's not that great to be fair. Like, I don't know. The typing itself, the coverage it has, it's a little bit tricky to play against Steel-type Pokemon. The typing itself is very good for the Ghost-type Pokemon, though, for Giratina, for example, because they're part normal type. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know. I don't really think this Pokemon is too great. It is definitely something you can invest in, but it's also difficult to get, so yeah. Next Pokemon going to be the Genesect. It's more like a fun Pokemon here. It would be a crime to put it above C tier in my opinion, so I would just gonna put it here. Not really have to talk too much about it. Has some cool nuke moves, has some magnet bomb and whatever. It's kind of an anti-meta Pokemon again, but it's not that great. Next one, we're going to have here the Florges. Something that I would put somewhere around the Togekiss ranking. I just like Togekiss a little bit more in the current meta than it, so I'm going to put it a little bit below, but this definitely has some potential to beat all the Dragon types, which are very common here, so solid pick, definitely decent. Next two boys here going to be the Everlux, and I don't really know where I want to rank it. It's still not the Master League Premier variant here, so it's going to be a little bit trickier. I'm just going to put the normal Everlux. I think I put them kind of together. They all have like both some benefits and some... I'm just gonna put them both into an upper D tier. Like, not for this meta, they're not really the best one for them. Like, you can still use, especially the normal one, I think is a little bit better because Ice Fang does some decent damage against, like, the Dragon and Flying type Pokemon here right now. But it's a little bit tricky, I don't know. Like, I don't know, they're a little bit clunky. You don't really see them too often in the Open Master League. Maybe I underestimate them, could be the case, but I just don't really have the knowledge because I never see them and never play them, but it's a little bit tricky. Next Pokemon, got a recent update, the Xerneas here. Definitely a solid pick. I just wouldn't put it above A. It's top A. Like, honestly, I played a little bit more recently, and in the lead, I like it way more than as a closer, basically. But still, it's very similar to another Pokemon, which is Zacian, which is still an S tier pick for sure. But it's like Zacian has, for example, a little bit better coverage with Wild Charge, and also feels just a little bit like, I don't know, less clunky than, for example, the Geomancy variant, even though they have like usually both on Snarl, but this also has the option for Quick Attack, so Zacian definitely still has to be up there as well. Maybe I underestimate Xerneas a little bit. It's a solid pick for sure, but I like Zacian a little bit more, so A tier is, I think, kind of fair for this Pokemon. Next one going to be Veltal, and I think they're kind of in a similar tier. I think they're both top A tier. Like, both of them are really usable. Both of them have a lot of play, but I don't know. It's a little bit tricky sometimes for this Pokemon because there are a lot of fairy types as well around. Actually, would put the Kyogre a little bit higher here as well, higher than Zekrom for sure, somewhere around here, together with the Mewtwo. Those Pokemon are all still viable though in the A tier. Definitely S and A tier are the Pokemon that you really want to build for this meta right now. Let's take a look at the next one, which is going to be most likely the best Pokemon ever, but of course nobody has it currently available. But the Zygarde form, like 100% variant, has even more bulk than the Lugia here, which is wild, plus having a very decent moveset. And same typing as the Garchomp, so Garchomp even gets less usage because this other Pokemon just has way better stats. This Pokemon going to be insane. Now we're going to have only a few Pokemon left here. Primarina, very cool anti-meta pick, somewhere around the Togekiss line, a little bit lower than this, but basically all the fairies are just chilling there, being the anti-meta for Dragon-type Pokemon. This Primarina is basically just only there for the fairy and water typing. The water typing really helps it to resist, for example, Kyogre, to resist or like to have just neutral damage from the Iron Head from Dialga. Stuff like this really helps this Pokemon out. So the typing makes it really nice, while the stats kinda hold it back still. Next Pokemon going to be Tapu Bulu. Played it myself, had a great time with it, but I cannot really put it higher than anything here, so I would put it actually to D tier. Just needs a move update. Actually, it would be really cool for a move update, but you need something like Nature's Madness, something that like helps the grass Pokemon out a little bit. But this is going to be it for this Pokemon, as they can move on to another Ultra Beast here with Nihilego. I have to put it somewhere into C tier. It has similar role, for example, than the Tyranitar, but even though like Nihilego can even beat something like a Zacian, but there are just so many like times where you're just going to get knocked out because you're going to be in a matchup that you cannot do anything. You cannot do anything against any steel type with this Pokemon, which is an issue for this Pokemon for sure, as there are a lot of steel types that are very decent, like Dialga. So like it's a little bit tricky to play this thing. Definitely has some potential though. Maybe a little bit higher is even worth it. I'm actually gonna put him at the top of the C tier here. That's definitely where it deserves. While also I think this Pokemon should deserve a little bit more Tyranitar, while something like Virizion or something could be a little bit lower. But I mean, like the tiers are kinda you can still swap it around depending on how you feel. Next Pokemon, Solgaleo. Honestly, every time I play against it, I hate playing against it. I have to put it S tier. While it's low S tier, this Pokemon is just so bulky. It can just debuff you the entire time. It has a great typing. It is just very strong. It's a core breaker for the Dialga plus Zacian core, breaks even the Lugia, breaks so many Pokemon in the current meta. It is, like, this Pokemon is really insane. Sad that it's so difficult to get right now, but a very strong Pokemon to build for sure. Like, it has to be S tier in my opinion. People just underestimate it because they don't see it too often, but it's just such a strong Pokemon, I feel like. I'm always weak against this one. But the next one is going to be the Buzzwole. I just have to put it somewhere in like low B tier. This Pokemon is definitely cool because there are some steel types, but there are also a lot of matchups that you don't want to be in, and the stats also don't really help it too much. The thing that like most people can just like swap it out of the launch doesn't really help this Pokemon either, so not really that great. What is actually great, and I think it's kind of underrated, is Melmetal. I have to put into A tier for sure. This Pokemon itself is not that great from like what it can do, but like the typing plus like the coverage it has, like it's just very decent for like the meta right now. You're going to be able to completely lock in the Lugia. Even if you run double Iron Bash, you can destroy the fairy type Pokemon. If you run Superpower, you can destroy Dialga. If you run Rock Slide, you can destroy the Rayquaza. It's like one of the Pokemon that kind of wants to have 3 charge moves though, so it's a little bit tricky. Most likely Rock Slide and Superpower is the best one for it, but very interesting Pokemon there. Next one is Zamazenta. If I put it above C, I think people are going to... I don't know, like it just has very decent stats. I think it's the same stats as Zacian, but it just doesn't have the same typing, as well as not really the best coverage. You still don't one-shot with a close combat at Dialga, which is kind of sad to see, so it's like a little bit awkward with this one. But still, yeah, it's definitely not as good as the Zacian, but still has some potential at least. Maybe I would even put it a little bit higher, but I'm just going to keep it here for now. What I'm also going to keep there is going to be the Ursaluna. It's a little bit safer than the other picks in this tier list, but like it's just not as great right now. Not for this meta, very decent for the other meta, for the Premier Cup meta, but like it's not that great. Next Pokemon just really needs to get a signature move. Make It Rain would really make this Pokemon a little bit better. The Golden Go has some potential to be like in the B tier because it can break apart like something like Dialga, Lugia. There's some anti-meta potential, but it's not that great. And the root is actually fairly decent. This Pokemon I can put into the top of the B tier as well, kinda here. But like nobody has it, so nobody really uses it, and so you don't really see it too often. But it has actually a lot of potential to break apart a lot of Pokemon, as no team is really prepared for this one. And that's going to be it for today's video, though. This is going to be the tier list for the top Pokemon for the Master League. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like as well if you skipped to this point right now. But otherwise, check out the videos on the screen right now, and I see you in the next one. Bye bye.